Dear listener, welcome into Other People's Shoes, Season 17, entitled Dear. This season, we venture into emotional territories as we explore words left unsent through this intimate process of writing a letter that was never meant to reach its recipient. The raw, unfiltered authenticity that speaks volumes in these letters. These unrevealed stories, confessions, and reflections held within these letters until now are powerful. Welcome to Dear, sincerely, Other People's Shoes.
That is right. Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I am your host, Neil Matthews. Welcome in to State Cross-Off Day. I know, you're like, what? That's still a thing we're doing around here? Yeah, in fact, today, it only took us 5 years and some change. Now I can say it. We're 3 ginormous, maybe baby states away from our grand total goal of everyone from 50 states. We welcome you into Nevada. The stratosphere is enormous here. You might want to get in Allegiant and in line to go see the giant Roomba stadium that the Raiders try to play football in. Love you, Al Davis. Just win, baby. Just win. Help me welcome in my new friend, Amber. Amber, how are you today?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for having me on the show and starting this off with so many Vegas puns.
Well, I was running out. I was like, is my luck run out yet? Do I need to walk the line like Johnny Cash? I think he did Vegas.
You weren't running out. You could go for days, I have a feeling.
My heart will go on. Celine Dion, when she did a residency there. That don't impress you much? I guess Shania Twain, right? When she did hers. Shall I keep going? Jesus, take the wheel. Carrie Underwood, let's go. That's good. Vegas. So funny story about Vegas. I saw a North Carolina game playing against Kentucky in T-Mobile Arena at Christmas time.
Football.
Basketball. Spent a week in Vegas, and I thought that was way too much time in Vegas. Am I wrong?
It's too much time on the strip.
Yes, it was. Sure. It was. There's only so many times you can go into the M&M store and ask for the light blue M&Ms. They get mad after 4 days, by the way.
Any more than a few hours on the strip is too much for me.
So what is the temperature typically on a normal Vegas day?
95. We'll probably hit low hundreds within the next 2 weeks. By middle of June, we'll be 110, 115. Last year, we topped out at 120.
Yikes.
June to September, I would rethink your travel plans.
Now we kick it back to sports with Chip Johnson, because I feel like you just gave us the weather girl report. Let's see what I did there.
I know, right?
Yeah, it was fun. Amber, I'm excited you're here today. I know we had some challenges, technology challenges. We can openly admit that because my friends always think I'm so tech savvy. You can attest to it. It was a little techie issues today.
It is, for sure. That's like podcasting. I don't know how long it goes before I have a podcast that one of us has tech issues. We just cover it up well.
How long have you been podcasting?
Oh, going on 4 years.
All right. Good for you. And the number one question everyone always asks is how many episodes and then what's your favorite?
Oh my gosh, there's too many to pick a favorite. I think we just published 350.
Wowzers.
Yeah, we just published 350. I rebranded when the book came out in August. This is probably my ego talking. It's still okay. I didn't want to lose all the progress I had done before, so I didn't close down the podcast and then restart it, because the idea of going back to one and somebody being like, you're a new podcaster. I'm like, listen, let's not go there. So we just rebranded. When you rebrand, it changes all the episodes before. We're at like 350, I think.
Well, we're closing in on 300. We're sadly only at 284-ish.
I'll probably go back to 2 episodes a week for a while. For almost 3 years, I published 2 episodes a week.
Bravo.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That's my small golf clap. Bravo.
Yeah.
It's like kids for me. 1 is good. 2 is too many. 3 is insane. 5 is like, I don't know what you're doing with your life.
People who post 1 every day, I'm like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, I'm with you. I couldn't. Not with quality, I feel like.
It's true.
Well, let's get into your story before we get rolling and going and go to the mailbox to read your letter, because guess who got a letter? Blue's Clues reference there. I wonder who it's from. Help us with this. We'd love to lead off every show with this question. What style of shoe does Amber love to wear?
Anything comfortable. Sneakers, usually. I have a policy in almost everything I do that if it's not comfortable, I'm not doing it. No, that's not really true, because so much of my story talks about getting out of my comfort zone. But when it comes to clothes, being comfortable, I used to get laughed at the courthouse when I would go into court. I would keep a pair of flip-flops in my briefcase, and I would change from my flip-flops into my heels right before I walked into the courtroom. And then as soon as I walked out, my flip-flops would go back on. Comfort is my number one requirement.
Well, I've always heard it said you have to spend money on 2 amazing things: a great great pair of shoes and an amazing bed, because that's what you do most of your life. Sleep and walk.
I feel like it's pretty solid advice.
I wear a lot of Jordans.
Okay.
Now as an adult, spend adult money. As a kid, I never had the name brand stuff. So now 16-year-old me is living in 44-year-old's body, trying to catch up.
It just sucks because with adult money comes adult responsibilities to pay for the things that you buy with adult money. It'd be really nice if somebody else took care of it.
I need like a rich uncle. You think Bill Gates is adopting any kids recently?
Yeah, that's probably a no-go. Worth a shot, though. I mean, shoot your shot, right?
Right? Yeah. I keep hoping like Jumpman's going to hear my podcast and be like, oh, let's get you some free Jordans, Neil. I'm like, okay, MJ, I see you. Alas, does not happen yet. I love that you're in Vegas. Again, I love that we get to cross that off the list. Now, help us with this. We're in this new series that you're a part of, and we're very excited that you're a part of. Some people are still struggling with this. Now, I let off first with a letter that I wrote, actually. One was to a child that my wife and I lost. My wife was pregnant for a little while before our daughter, and we ended up losing the baby. And I wrote a letter actually to, I thought it was going to be a son. Maybe that's me being a guy. We didn't ever really know. I shared that letter, and then I wrote a letter to my now 16-year-old daughter. She listened to it and she said, Dad, I cried. I was like, I'm so sorry you cried. You know, that wasn't my goal. Like, let's make her cry. Check that box. I had this lady even come to me at church and say, I listened to that first episode, Neil. That was the most powerful episode I've ever heard you give. And I'm thinking, we've had other episodes that I think were equally as good. Thank you. So this idea of writing a letter. Now, again, I went keyboard to iPhone and wrote it out. Some people have actually physically handwritten stuff out and read them, which again, I'm not throwing rocks if they've done it or not done it. This idea is, again, writing a letter that you, for whatever reason, can't send. Maybe because the person's already gone, or maybe we just don't have the courage. And I say we, like the people coming on as the we, don't have the ability to send it to them. Maybe there's still some trepidation there, still some heartache there. There's still a hurdle there that stopped them from being able to send, or maybe they don't even know where they are. So how do you send a letter? You don't know where they are. Like Elvis, when he was in Vegas, Return to Sender. I had to get one more Vegas reference in there. And I love Elvis, and that's one of my favorite songs. So for you, when you think about this idea of writing a letter, and if you could send it, who would you send it to and why?
No question, my dad. My dad was such a pivotal part of who I am. He passed away when I was 18. And I feel like, one hand, I had him my entire childhood. My brothers were 7 and 9 when he passed away. On that hand, I'm thankful that I had my dad through my entire childhood. And on the other hand, I feel like at 18, you're just getting to the point where your parents are cool again and you want to have conversations with them. I love songwriting. And I was sitting at a songwriting show. One of the guys was sharing this song that he had written. He says, I wrote this song after I listened to an interview where somebody asked a person if they could go back in time anywhere, where would they go? And the answer was, I'd go back and listen to all the things that my dad said when I wasn't listening. And that broke my heart. I could relate to that. So I feel like I never got to have those adult conversations with my dad where I actually came into being functioning member of society instead of just a student that thought my dad was old.
First off, it's an amazing moment to have. Now, again, I know it was sort of someone else's and we're sort of piggybacking on that. I love that idea of being around someone and hearing the things said about you when you weren't around. There's so much wonder in that and intrigue. What do they say about me when I'm not around?
Yeah.
What kind of things do you think your dad would have said to you?
What's interesting, I don't know where your listeners fall, and some of them are going to call me nuts and others are going to lean into this. It's a little woo-woo, which is not my thing normally. Through my journey, through my healing journey, I ended up taking some mindset classes that led into some spirituality classes. And one of the things that we kind of learned how to do was to allow ourselves to go to a place where we could sit anywhere in the world that we wanted to sit with anybody that we wanted to sit with and have a conversation with them. Obviously, it's a exercise in active imagination. You're not really sitting on a park bench with this person. For me, I wanted nothing more than to sit next to my dad and have a conversation with him. And no matter how many times I went through this exercise, I couldn't freaking do it. My grandma would come, my uncle came, I had a couple conversations with him, and I couldn't get this conversation with my dad. And then one day I was flying from St. Louis back to Vegas, and my dad and I spent so much time in the air together. I always sit in the same place on a plane. I always sit towards the back on the right-hand side where I can see the plane wing in front of me, but I can only see little pieces of it and I can see the sky. I get to look out the window. As I looked at what I could see of the wing, I realized for the first time that I had been trying to get my dad to come and talk to me in the wrong place, that all I needed to do was look out the window. So every time I fly, I have conversations with my dad. I look out the window. He sits on the wing of the plane. I just have these conversations with him. For me, it's just a reminder. He was so supportive. I have no doubt that if he was here, he would tell me that he was proud of me. He would probably tell me that I'm too hard on myself, probably tell me I work too much. Oh my gosh. He would question my decision not to have children. I think that would probably surprise him. Overall, though, I think he would just do everything that he could to make sure he knew I was loved.
You know, one of my favorite questions that I came up with on the show, I'm sure I'm not original in this. I like to think I am. I haven't heard too many people ask this type of question. The Back to the Future movie has always fascinated me. And then I watched Big Bang Theory, much like most of us did. And there's this scene in Big Bang Theory where they're like trying to understand the time loop. They're smarties. I think back, if I could go back to my parents' era in high school and see them in their moment, or if I could time travel forward and see my daughter in her older adult years and see where she's at and see what life is like, even if I could time travel back when I was 5 and like hug myself and say, listen, young Neil, you're going to be okay. Right now is really hard and I know it's tough. It's going to be okay. Listen, you marry this amazing woman. You have this amazing house. Things like that. Not necessarily, hey, invest in Amazon. By the way, if there's this fruit company that comes along, put some pennies and dollars into that. Not like that per se. To go back and tell myself, you're going to be okay. And then I think, well, if I were to do that, what does that do to the butterfly effect? The movie comes into play. Right. I think Ashton Kutcher was in that. And I'm like, well, does that mess up the right now?
Did you ever watch the movie Frequency?
Yes. I love it.
Yeah, that's
Jim Caviezel. I always say his name wrong. Jim Jesus, as I call him, because he ended up playing Jesus in the Passion of the Christ. I love that movie too. Dennis Quaid, great actor. I love him too.
So if you want to have goosebumps, my dad and my connection was always the stars. We would lay outside, look at the stars. I love them. I have a tattoo on my arm of his headstone, which is the Northern Lights. And then there's 3 really big stars that have mine and my brother's names written in them. So I have that recreated on my arm. Everything had to do with the sky. And the last movie my dad watched 2 days before he died was Frequency. It just blows my mind.
Wow. Well, we just had the Northern Lights down here in Oregon.
Yeah, we missed them down here all the way in Vegas.
You should see some of the pictures people posted.
Oh my gosh, they were gorgeous. There's a resort in Finland that I'm going to go to next Christmas where you can sleep in glass igloos underneath the Northern Lights and look at the sky.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
In igloos. I mean, yeah, the Northern Lights were cool. Okay, fine. But the igloos with the glass tops, that's what gets me excited because I like penguins.
Yeah, I'm super, super excited to go.
I'm fanboying over here of the igloo dwelling idea. It sounds exciting. Well, even in Frequency, you know that the love that he has for his dad is so passionate and so strong. I often have gotten an opportunity through the years to do funerals for folks. Some I know, some I don't. The number one question I ask people sometimes in their moment of grief, which sometimes is like one of these 50-50 moments, like how's this going to go? Is this good or bad? Is there a trait or a quality about your dad that you love and miss the most?
Oh, yeah. My dad had the most infectious laugh. He had the ability to make anybody just feel this immense amount of joy at any time. He was 42 when he passed away. At 42, even then, he could make people think he was 12. 13. He was just a child.
Well, I asked that generally, whatever the trait is, and I've heard some cool ones, and that's equally as cool. Are you going out and carrying out laughter? Are you making sure that every place you go leaves maybe a little bit more funnier than what it should have been? Are you bringing that laughter and joy into situations? Because that's a great way to carry him on.
I certainly would hope so. Such an interesting question. I don't know that I've ever thought about it. Probably not as much as I should, if I'm given the honest answer.
Again, I don't sit on a seat of judgment. common. I mean, I know you're a lawyer, and so you're used to being maybe in front of a judge. This isn't one of those moments.
It just makes you
I
think.
promise.
No, it just makes me think. I definitely think about him often when I'm doing anything that involves caring for another person. My dad was incredibly caring. That joyful laughter, though, there definitely hasn't been enough of that in my life. And a lot of that just comes from the fact that I'm still on my healing journey. He died a long time ago. I'm still on my healing journey and probably will be for a while. Didn't open that healing box for 15 years, from 2001 until he died, until 2016 when the universe gifted me with panic attacks and anxiety attacks. I didn't grieve. I just put my head down and worked, thought that eventually it would stop hurting. And then I was left with no choice but to heal. And so realistically, I've only been allowing his memory, the emotions that come along with that, growth that comes along with allowing myself to remember him for the last 6 years. In fact, when I started my healing journey, I didn't have memories of my life with him. I knew things. I had big memories. For the most part, it was so much easier for my mind to block out those memories than it was for me to remember life without him.
That's what I'm wondering about. Is the healing journey involving the grief of losing your dad, or is there other elements at play in the healing journey? Or is this part of it?
There's a ton of other elements. Yeah. Okay. My dad was kind of the last nail in the coffin, which is a horrible reference when we're talking about death, but that's what I'm going to say. I have just suffered an immense amount of loss in my life. I started experiencing death at the age of 7. My cousin committed suicide when I was 7. My uncle committed suicide when I was 14. I went to 10 funerals between the ages of 7 and 18. At some point in time, I didn't realize this until I started actually seeking help in 2016. At some point in time, my brain started believing that it was easier to be alone than it was to be with people who were going to leave. When I started going to therapy, my therapist actually diagnosed me with an abandonment disorder, which makes complete sense when we think about life. What I'm still recovering from, and I think what I mean when I refer to my healing journey, is the willingness to connect, the willingness to be seen and heard, the willingness to build relationships on a deep emotional level, knowing that those relationships are only going to last as long as they're meant to last. I have no control over that. It's been a process of realizing how much I had shut down and how emotionally guarded I had become. I think it's no surprise for me that I found myself the legal career where emotions aren't tolerated, where people hire me to be objective and analytical about their case and non-emotional. So as I realized how much I had just shut out connection all around, then the next process in that, once I started allowing myself to connect with people, was realizing how angry I was. I didn't think that I was still angry. I thought that I had let it all go. Processing that anger and realizing that probably for the last 20 years, I've just been in this constant state of being pissed at the world and not knowing it. And then starting to allow myself to feel peace and connect, shut out God, I shut out religion, I shut out spirituality, refused to connect with anything for a very, very long time.
I told you in the green room, and I don't mind sharing this, I am a person of faith. And so I'll just share me because it's easier. I've walked through death. I don't love it. I don't embrace it. I think death sucks. I've seen death of kids. I've seen death of teenagers. I've seen death of adults. I've seen death of older people. It's never easy. I would love to say that it's like putting on a pair of shoes. It gets easier. Every time it feels like a different pair of shoes. They fit differently. They smell differently. They tie differently. They walk differently. Attribute a lot of people in life to shoes, that they can look really good on the outside, but they can still stink on the inside. I'm not trying to be too flippant there.
Yeah.
With all the death, do you ever blame God or deity, universe? I would say God. I don't know what you would say in that moment. You shut God out. Those were your words.
Yeah. I don't know that I blamed God as much as questioning that he existed. The only thing that kept me tied to any type of spirituality, there was two things. First of all, I don't think that there's any way that we can function in this world and not acknowledge that there's something bigger than ourselves out there. So no matter how bad it got, I never got to the point where I believed there was nothingness out there. And then the other thing that I would hold on to, and really the only thing that kept me connected and searching at all, was that I refused to live in a world where I had seen my dad for the last time. And I don't know what happens when we die. Nobody does. Do know that I believe two things. Number one, I will see his face again. And if I'm wrong, that's fine. I can't function in a world where I don't see him again. And number two, that there is some sort of God or deity or whatever you want to call it, or him or her. I was raised in a very restrictive, judgmental, shame and guilt-based religion. And I refuse to believe that what I drink holds more weight than how I treat people. Whether I have caffeine determines whether I go to heaven or hell. To the extent that there is a judgment, that judgment is based on actions in relation to other people and not things that don't matter. Part of the reason I left the church was shortly after my dad died, a couple of people came to my house and tried to use his death as a bargaining chip for my re-engagement in the church, reminding me that if I wasn't a better person than he was, then I would never see him again. They did not get the reaction from me that they expected.
Can I ask what church that was?
I was raised Mormon.
I had a feeling.
I had this really interesting relationship with religion, which was unique. I grew up in a town of 1,800 people, 9 Mormon churches. It was peer pressure was going to church. My grandparents were very active, but my parents weren't. So I had the peer pressure exposure to the religion, but I also had the permission to not let it consume my life. When I left the church, there wasn't any questions about why from my immediate family. Now, my extended family had questions, but my immediate family wasn't active anyways. I think what concerned them more than me leaving the church was the complete shutdown of spirituality. So when I work with clients in a coaching capacity, I start with a life wheel, which some people might be familiar with. It's how we really start to gauge where you're at. The wheel looks like a Trivial Pursuit piece. It's got all parts of your life on it: career, health, relationships, spirituality, all the stuff. And the first time that was ever given to me, I looked at it and I raised my hand and I said, what do we do if one of these areas of life don't apply to us? And they said, what area do you think doesn't apply to you? And I said, this spirituality shit. I don't need any of this in here. She looked at me and she said, well, I mean, it's your life. Replace it with whatever you want. I think it's going to be a pretty empty one without any type of spirituality. That conversation was 16 years after my dad died. It took another 3 years for me to put spirituality back on that piece of paper. And it took another 6 months after that for me to walk into a church again. What I noticed was that as I started connecting again, as I started dealing with the trauma, as I started actually acknowledging that there were things that I needed to say and experience that I had been shutting myself down from, I started craving that connection with something bigger than myself. Still not incredibly active, and I'll never walk into a Mormon church again. When I walked into that church for the first time, this is why this show is so interesting to me. You can't make this stuff up. Stuff doesn't happen by accident. I will never believe it. The day that I decided I was going to go back to church, I found a church that somebody had tried to introduce me to a couple of years back, and I wasn't ready. So when I decided that I wanted to step back into a church, that was the one that was forefront in my mind. I made the choice to go alone because I didn't want anybody pressuring me into staying if I decided to walk out in the middle of service. So I went alone. I walked in and they were doing a new series. So this church works in 6-week series. And it was week 1 of a brand new series. And so they handed me a pen and a piece of paper. And they said, for this first week of this new series, we're asking everybody to go over and write a letter to their former self. And with all of the healing that I had done and all of the mindset work that I had done, this idea of communicating with who you used to be spoke to my soul. Every time I've gone to this church, I've left with something of value. And it's the first time that I've ever connected religion as having a value and a purpose. In that first sermon, the pastor stopped in the middle of a sermon and he says, I don't know why I'm supposed to say this. I just have this immense belief that I'm supposed to tell whoever's here right now that doesn't know what they believe, that this is the place that you get to come and figure it out. That's not the way that I was raised. We didn't question things in the Mormon religion. So the idea of going and being told it's okay if you don't believe everything that I'm telling you, like you get to have free thought and you get to figure it out on your own. That's the only environment that I can thrive in. For me, it's just this new world of exploring a connection with something bigger than myself in a place where it's okay to say sometimes I think it's bullcrap.
Well, Amber, first off, I want to acknowledge what you said as powerful. I want to thank you for your honesty. And it's okay. Listen, I hit a period of time when I hit 30. I'm 44 now. I wasn't working. There was a whole series of events that happened to me. And I ran into some Mormons. They wanted to come to my house to practice. That was their cover. They were trying to practice, but they really wanted to convert me. And so I said, okay, I'm going to set my quote unquote evangelical Jesus on the shelf. Not that I forgot about him. I just set him on the shelf for a second to see if I could really buy into what they were offering. Air quoting when I say offering. And I couldn't. What that did is it opened my eyes and my world to what do they believe? And could I, Vegas reference, could I put it all on black and let it ride? Or red and let it ride? I don't know. I don't play craps, so I don't know. Or roulette. I don't know. In that, I personally, this is me. This isn't the show. This is Neil. Neil discovered he couldn't. And I started to read, and I'm not a reader. I am not an avid reader. I have authors that come on and they're like, will you read my book? And I'm like, probably not. I'm a dyslexic kid from the 80s. Probably not going to happen. But hey, if you send it to me and I run across somebody that I think could really use your book, I'm going to give it to them as a gift. You good with that? And everyone has always been like, absolutely, do it. That's my caveat with authors. But I couldn't grab on to the Mormon faith. And I know we're not necessarily here to talk about that because we're not, but I'll finish this thought. I'm proud of you, and we don't know each other, but I am. I can say this with confidence. I'm proud of you for making a stand to say, it's not for me. To give God another chance after all the heartache, sorrow, and the pain, and not blame him. I mean, maybe you did on a microscopic level, or maybe even on a catastrophic level. I don't know your heart. I just know, thanks for not shutting him off.
Thank you for that.
I really think, and this is me being an evangelist, I know in Psalm 139, he talks about creating you in your mother's womb, knitting you together in the secret place. I don't know what that secret place is, but man, I want to get there one day. And he talks about how he has so many thoughts for you that if you try to count them, they would outnumber the grains of sand on the seashore. I mean, that's in the Bible. So I just want to encourage you in that. Dad seems like a rock star.
Dad was a rock star.
I know he probably has his flaws and he wasn't perfect and he didn't walk on water. People would wonder and want to know, what about mom? If we flip that coin over.
One of my favorite sayings, and one of the things that change hits me with more often than not, and that I in turn share with my coaching clients, is if you're going to blame them for the bad, you got to blame them for the good.
Right.
When we talk about shutting God out and blaming him, there's a lot that I could blame somebody for. I also have a lot of really good things in my life. I know that I didn't create them all. Mom, if you're going to blame her for the bad, you got to blame her for the good. We'll just start there. Mom is a big part of my book. I thought that I had learned the lessons I was meant to learn from my relationship with my mom until I wrote my book. And there were a whole lot more that came out. My mom and I did not have a very good relationship growing up, and Dad was actually the buffer for that. So when Dad passed away, I felt like I had lost both my parents. I wasn't capable seeing my mom for what she was at the time, which was a grieving widow. And I didn't understand why she couldn't be the parent that I needed her to be. She was raising two kids, 7 and 9, and I was 18. As horrible as it sounds, I was the least of her concerns. And I think that that's fair for me to have been the least of her concerns. But in my world, I was the only thing that mattered, and she hated me. My mom and I had a rough relationship my entire life. And it wasn't until recently that we started to repair that. My mom is an incredible human. She gave me a lot of amazing qualities. What's interesting is if we ever need that in life real-time reframe, I used to always think my mom didn't love me enough and she didn't show me enough affection and she didn't coddle me. She didn't show me that she cared about me. And frankly, my mom's just not capable of it. My mom's not the nurturing type of person. In an environment I was in recently, I ran into a mother and daughter. Daughter was in her 40s, mother was in her 70s. Daughter still lived at home, was worried about what she was going to do when mom retired. How was she going to support herself? And I remember stepping back and thinking, my mom, I may have thought that she didn't care, but if her lack of coddling and her lack of nurturing gave me the independence to not live at home when I'm 40, then I will take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday. We look at the other side of the coin and we're like, oh, wait a second. That's what it could have looked like. That's what my life could have been like. My mom and I recently had a conversation around a campfire with a significant amount of alcohol, as most in-depth conversations in my family happen. I remember asking her why she didn't love me when I was a kid. And she said, is that what you think? I said, I don't know what evidence I have to the contrary. And she, in not so many words, told me that she just didn't want to grow up and be a parent. And my dad was there. And it started because I told her I was jealous of the relationship that she had with my brothers. She was very clear that if my dad hadn't passed away, she would have the same relationship with my brothers that she had with me. She never wanted to grow up and be a parent. She was still a child. She was 17 when she had me. For her, when my dad passed away, she had no choice but to grow up and raise two children. Who else was going to do it? My dad raised me so that my mom could stay the immature child. Nobody ever kind of forced her to grow up. It gave me a really interesting perspective that all the external validation I constantly seek from other people because I felt like I didn't get it enough as a kid, that none of that was about me. All of it was about my mom not being capable of being that person. I say all of this to say I never had food. I never had to worry about where I was going to sleep at night. I never had to worry about whether or not I was going to be taken care of emotionally, mentally, physically. I talk about having a rough relationship with my mom. It's really relative. My mom was a very good person. We just had a lot of support systems. In my book, and this is what I mean by saying I thought I had learned all the lessons I was supposed to learn from my mom until the book. In the book, I talk about the fact that every victim needs a villain. And I didn't realize how much I had been a victim. My mom was the person I blamed for everything that went wrong in my life. So it's just interesting to step into owning the things that I'm responsible for and the things that I create, and allowing my mom to be the person that she is, which is just an imperfect human being.
Amber, I loved everything you said, but I hate the statement you just made. And I'm using the word hate on purpose.
Okay.
With a little bit of tongue in cheek. Every victim needs a villain? No, that's garbage. I'm taking that out of the show. That's stupid.
Just because it hurts?
Maybe a little bit. Maybe as you describe your mom, there may be a friend named Zach who has very similar type experiences. I'm going to have to tell Zach not to listen to this episode because it might make him mad. Disclaimer, Zach, stop listening right now. No, listen, I really do. I love what you're saying. Tell us about the book. Let's segue into that.
It's called Break Your Bullshit Box for a reason. And that's because we sit in this reality thinking the way that we see the world is the way that it is. And then something happens and we realize, oh, wait a minute, not what actually happened. Or our brain makes up stories. And so much so, one of the absolute craziest ones to me was that my mom and I argued back and forth about when my dad died. And I would have gone to the death arguing that my dad died in the morning. And my mom had to pull out the police report and the newspaper articles to show me that he actually died in the late afternoon. In my head, in order for me to fit the story that I had been telling myself about my relationship with my mom and what happened that day, all of the things, it was a morning thing. We see relationship the way that we need to see them in order to fit the narrative of our life that we are prepared to face and to own up to.
Again, I don't like that. So let's go ahead and take that part out too. I heard this said in a rap song of all places. Sometimes your feelings can give wrong directions. Mm-hmm. And I wholeheartedly hug that like a Care Bear. Yes. Most of my life, it feels like my feelings are really bad at giving me really bad directions in life. I don't know if you know anything about the Enneagram, which some people poo-poo on, which whatever. I'm a 4. By nature, I'm more emotional than most dudes. My wife teases me I have more emotions than her and I combined. In fact, I could probably put some emotions on eBay and still have some left over, be okay. I don't know why. I hate it as a guy. I don't want to have all this emotions, and I love Hallmark movies, and my friends tease me because I love You Got Mail.
You've got mail.
Yeah, I'm that dude. I'm that guy.
You shouldn't hate it. I mean, I'm not going to tell you what you should or shouldn't do.
Well, good. Don't shit on me. Yeah, that's bad.
I know, right? From the other perspective, being around somebody that is okay having emotions and sharing them is a safe space to be. I don't know you or your wife. However, I'm sure that she's thankful at some level that you are as safe as you are, because the alternative is possible.
Tell us about the book, why write it? And then my favorite question to ask during book time is hardest chapter and why.
So the book is called Break Your Bullshit Box, Eliminate Your Excuses, Empower Your Journey, Enjoy Your Results. I wrote it because I felt like I had something to say. It was a healing journey for me. It came out on August 23rd, 23rd of last year, which was the 22nd anniversary of my dad's death. I wanted to redefine that day for myself. So it was really important that it came out on that day. Hardest chapter, surprisingly, not the one that I expected it to be. In order to cope with the panic attacks and anxiety attacks that I was feeling before I knew why I was feeling them, I found obstacle course racing. It was my outlet. So I did obstacle course racing for about 2 years, from the beginning of 2016 to the end of 2017. And during that period of time, I ran 20 some odd Tough Mudders, and then I ran a 24-hour endurance obstacle course race. And I thought, thank you, I thought that that would be the easiest chapter to write about. It wasn't. Putting myself back in the emotions, because at that point in time, every race I was healing. Every race I was doing something that I didn't think I could do before. I was finding myself again. I was coming into the strong, capable person that I was before my dad died and am now. And remembering the emotions when I wasn't that person was more difficult than I thought it was going to be.
Wow. My godmother's birthday is August 23rd.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And she's amazing. Shout out to Debbie. I love that you're able to take your pain, harness it, and really use it for good. I've seen so many people through the years, when bad stuff continues to seem to happen, they shut down and they go into this spiral. It's really hard to get them out. So for you, if somebody right now is hearing you and they're maybe mid spiral before it hits Oz, in a sense, like the tornado, what would be your counsel to them to try to break that cycle of getting out of the cyclone? The cyclone.
Thing that I'll pre-frame this with, people were telling me that I needed help a long time before I realized I needed help. When I say I was suffering from panic attacks and anxiety attacks, it was 4 days of not being able to breathe and not being able to eat. I was in a city that I wasn't familiar with. I was there for work. I couldn't leave. I didn't know anybody there. All I had to rely on was myself. There was no comfort that I could reach out to, nobody that I could spend time with that could make me forget what was going on. That was the first time that I realized that I've just been distracting myself with things. When I'm alone, I am not okay. And even then, even with that, the moment that I got back into my comfort zone, I almost canceled my first therapy appointment. I thought I was okay. All the bad emotions went away as soon as I got back into my comfort zone. My expectation is that the person that's listening to this, that is in that spiral, feels so out of control sometimes, and then so comfortable sometimes, and then so out of control sometimes, and so comfortable sometimes. They allow themselves to believe that the out of control times are the abnormal, and that the control and comfortable times are actually where they're at. And in fact, it's the opposite. All I can say to you is talking to somebody isn't weakness. Opening up to somebody, no matter how much you think you don't need it, is never a bad idea. If you go talk to somebody, if you make that therapy appointment for the first time and you go talk to somebody and they tell you that you're perfectly fine and well balanced and that there's no reason for you to be in their office, then you've lost nothing. My expectation, though, is that if you feel the need to pick up the phone and call that person, that's not what you're going to find. When I went to that first therapy appointment, I thought I was good. A friend of mine begged me to keep my appointment, and I went fully expecting for it to be a one-time thing because I didn't need to talk to anybody. I sat on my therapist's couch and cried for 60 minutes about how I didn't need therapy. Live in a society where we convince ourselves that we're supposed to be able to do it alone, and we're supposed to be a certain amount of strength, and that talking to somebody is weakness. I don't go to therapy anymore. My business coach serves as half therapist when I need her to. I still have an outlet of places that I can go to talk. I'm comfortable enough jumping on a Facebook Live and having my own therapy session in front of people, because I know that what I'm going through is not unique. I know that if I'm sitting in my office stressing about something, that there is somebody else somewhere in the world that's stressing about it as well. And I would much rather process that with somebody else that might be able to benefit from it than hold it in on my own. So just because I don't see a therapist anymore on a regular basis doesn't mean that I don't go to therapy. I just do it in a way that's a lot more public than I used to.
Well, and a lot cheaper, I'm sure. Too.
And a hell of a lot cheaper. My business coach is not cheap, so maybe not cheaper.
I think that's what stops people. Is finances stop people? There's no ROI, return on their investment. Maybe they don't want to go because of that reason. It's hard to trust somebody, or they're going to think you're crazy. Ways to stop you. There are hurdles that get in your way. I once had a manager say to me, I worked in a corporate environment for a really long time. She said, my job, Neil, is to get anything out of your way that's stopping you from moving forward. So if there's something in your way that's hindering you, let me know, because we're going to get it out of the way. I'm like, cool, that person over there, they're in the way. Let's get rid of them. She's like, not that.
Not that. The problem with that approach, and while I appreciate a manager saying that, the problem with that approach is that we don't know what's in our way. That is why talking to somebody that is able to help you. The science that we do is NLP training. I think it's incredibly valuable. So whether you find a personal development seminar that you feel like helps you, or whether you go to therapy, on the cost aspect, I'm going to say this blanket statement, knowing that I don't know everybody's life that's listening to this. Forgive me if somebody hears it that it's not true for. However, I'm pretty confident that it's true for everybody. That the cost of getting the help that you need is a lot less than what you're currently spending numbing the pain. So whatever you're numbing it with, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's entertainment, I never let myself slow down. I had 6 hobbies. I never went home. I didn't realize until I started healing that the reason I had so many hobbies is because I didn't like the person that I was when I was alone. Whatever you're doing to numb the pain right now is a hell of a lot more costly, both physically, emotionally, and financially, than getting help.
Yeah, Amazon's great therapy. Just saying.
Yes.
Amber, as we wrap up today, I just want to say, if people want to know more about you, more about your story, more about maybe, hey, I want to know more about the book, how can they reach out and what's the best way they can connect?
The best way is to go to the website, successdevelopmentsolutions.com. All of the information is there. I also have a free Facebook group they can join. So if they go track me down on Facebook, called the Break Your Bullshit Box Community. And then I'm most active on Facebook. All of my profiles are public. Find me, Amber Ray, R-A-E Fuhriman, on all platforms.
Amber, I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate all that you gave. You know, back in the day when we would handwrite letters to people, I don't know if this ever happened to you, because I don't know how old you are, nor do you have to tell me. My wife and I started out handing handwritten notes to each other. That's how lame and old we are. She's probably saying I'm not old. She's not old, I'm old. So to clarify, we would handwrite notes together and hand them back and forth. And then we got smart. We bought a spiral notebook and we handed the notebook back and forth. So,
yes,
you know, it wasn't as bad as folding the paper and handing it. The end of most notes to girlfriend, now wife, I would generally put a PS. What would be your PS in this moment?
My PS would be that the things that you think are your greatest faults are the things that the world is waiting for you to share with them.
I love that. That's good. That's really good. Well, Amber, again, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate all that you gave. You mentioned in our little preliminary and maybe even a little bit of the podcast, where can folks go to listen to that? We didn't really ever talk about that. Is that a thing people can go and do? You said you rebranded, so help us with that.
I know this is going to shock people. It's called the Break Your Bullshit Box podcast. So they can find it on all platforms. We release an episode every Monday and we bring on some cool guests. I'm always looking for any suggestions of what people want to hear. Go check it out. Let me know what you think.
Nice. See, that was easy. Yeah. And they've done way more episodes than I have. So there's that. Probably have a cooler team.
I mean,
too.
way is an exaggeration, I think.
Way is a lot. All right, guys and gals, kids and campers alike, we crossed the street. That's where my mailbox is now. In our new house, freshly built. I have to leave the shoe shack. I have to go down the pathway, past the sliding glass doors, 2 sliding glass doors, by the way. No grass yet. I have to go outside the gate. I have to cross Table Rock Road just to get to my mailbox. It's quite the journey. I'm wondering about this for you. And speaking of journeys, it's kind of ironic maybe that we walk into that direction, the journey. What's your journey like right now? Is there still that person when we think about it and we close our eyes? Maybe not if we're driving. If we were to close our eyes and we were to envision that person and we got to the mailbox, we opened it up, we reach way back inside and we see this single envelope in there and we can't really make out the return address label, but our name is written in calligraphy. Who do you hope that letter is from? Anybody? I know for some of you, you hear Amber's story, Neil, it's my dad. That's who I want it to be from. Okay. If he's still living, go tell him how much you love him today. Just food for thought. As we get out of here, remember this. Remember, do not forget when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned until next week when we walk in other people's shoes.